Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf with you. Got a great show for you guys today on this Wednesday evening. We'll have some fun stuff. Giuliani and workers at the TSA have just stopped caring. That's a fun story in the midst of the disaster of the shutdown. Then we've got Verizon versus the unions. Some of their tactics have been revealed by documents, so we'll look at that and sort of look at the impact of that. We also have Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, getting a new position inside the House. That's an interesting one. That's actually a fantastic story. So we have good news. We have MSNBC, a new political analyst joins the MSNBC cast. We're going to talk about that. So that's fun. All right. So I know there's a little bit of audio video sync issue has to do with my camera. That's why we're fundraising for a new one. So I'm not quite sure how to fix that, but I usually fix it in post so the videos tend to sync up a little bit better. So unfortunately, there's really nothing I can do a whole lot about that I know of. But anyway, so speaking of the camera fund, we are at $500, so we are a third of the way there, raising $1,500 for the camera. Some new donors to that is Mark Davis. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Mark. Lori Bishop as well, and Shane McAndrews. So thank you, Mark, Lori, and Shane. You guys are awesome. But thank you to everybody who has donated to this camera fund to help us get better equipment. So, you know, kind of start the new year off right and, you know, look more professional and you know, all that stuff. So that's what this fund is going for. And again, we are a third of the way there. If you want to donate, go to gofundme.com/TYTNationCamera. All right. Anyway, so now we've got this. Let's see. I was going to say something. So there's a breakdown that we've got, and I just want to address for a couple of minutes. I'm sure you guys have heard of Kirsten Gillibrand. She is running for president. She's doing an exploratory committee, blah, blah, blah. Kirsten Gillibrand, of course, is not somebody that progressives trust. So I don't trust her. I don't trust her positions. She is more centrist Democrat. And so she fought against the ACA during her time earlier, during that fight. So I don't trust her new positions on Medicare for all or anything like that. So anyway, so that's what we have here. Okay. Again, look, I'm not in favor of Gillibrand, but at least it's good that more people are getting into it because I want all these positions on display so we can actually have a choice. So anyway, let's move on. Let's get to the first story. Let's have some fun. And of course that is broken and I don't know why. Okay, anyway. So while the press is fixated on the government shutdown, and rightly so, I've been talking about it quite a bit actually, news about the upcoming Mueller report happens to be a bit scarce. Now, if this reporting is to be believed, the White House is kind of scared about what that report is going to say. Now, one person might be taking this especially hard, and that is Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Now, according to Vanity Fair, now this is a Gabriel Sherman piece, so again, it is from an unnamed Trump source, official in the White House. So, again, take that with a grain of salt, right? Now, once that same source tells Sherman that Giuliani, quote, hates the job of being the president's attorney because Trump is, quote, very hard to deal with. Now, whether or not you believe this report, and again, I don't quite know, right? That right there, that part, Trump being really hard to deal with, and Giuliani being at least exasperated at this whole affair, at being Trump's lawyer, that to me is the most believable thing in this story. Obviously, Trump is notoriously hard to work with. He doesn't listen to his lawyers. That's according to his past lawyers. He constantly gaffes. He says things that he shouldn't say, contradicts his lawyers and himself, of course, and of course, he lies constantly. He's a pathological liar. And so, look, whatever Giuliani is getting paid, I don't think it's likely enough. And to be honest, the president will probably attempt to stiff him anyway after this whole thing is over. So, I'm just saying. But moving on. Now, that same report says that Giuliani has been telling associates lately that he expects Special Counsel Robert Mueller will release the first part of his final report dealing with whether Trump obstructed justice in his efforts to fight investigations into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. And he fears that the report will be, quote, horrific for Trump. The source simply said, Giuliani is very worried about the report. Rudy thinks it'll be soon, said another person of Giuliani's expectations for Mueller's report, and says, quote, it's only a matter of time. Well, hey, man, we're waiting. Tick-tock, tick-tock, right? The country is kind of burning around us, and we're still waiting for the Mueller report. But look, you know what? As frustrating as it is to wait, I get it. I get why. Mueller's team, of course, is taking their time, and they're trying to do things right. And at the end of the day, it's like I'd rather have them do it right and come out with something that is substantial than half-ass it and come out with something that's not substantial. But at the same time, I have this worry that this Mueller report is going to be underwhelming. And if it is a letdown, that's going to be so sad. So sad. And potentially disastrous. Then again, you do also have reports recently, in fact, where Trump has spoken with Putin, right, without his own interpreter, with just Putin and his interpreter, and has personally seized the notes of meetings from his own interpreter, basically hiding the context and the content of those conversations. And why would you do that? That's weird. I mean, that doesn't seem at all suspicious to you guys? Not in the least bit? I mean, that's weird. According to the Washington Post, who originally posted this report, Trump's secrecy surrounding Putin is not only unusual by historical standards, it's outrageous. That's a quote from Strobe Talbot, who's a former Deputy Secretary of State now at the Brookings Institution. Now, this guy has had some experience with meetings between heads of state. For example, he took place in more than a dozen meetings between President Bill Clinton and then Russian President Boris Yeltsin in the 1990s. So, I think he kind of knows what he's talking about. I'm just saying. Now, he also adds, quote, it handicaps the U.S. government, our government, the experts and advisors and cabinet officers who are there to serve the president, and it certainly gives Putin much more scope to manipulate Trump. Now, the question at the heart of this investigation is that what's going on? Is Trump being manipulated or into collusion, or is he doing it of his own free will? I happen to think that if there is collusion, that Trump is too dumb to not be manipulated by a foreign power. And that, of course, when you talk about him being manipulated by a foreign power, that's incredibly dangerous. So that's some serious stuff, right? As far as hiding these, interactions with Putin and what's actually going on, that's sketchy as fuck. And think about it this way in this context. If you're rolling your eyes, because I know some progressives out there are. Well, think about, had Obama done the same thing with Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu? Now, I would hope that you guys in that situation, and if that were happening, would say, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of sketchy as fuck. I'm not comfortable with that. Because, look, already, what we have in our country is Israel having a lot of influence over American politicians. In fact, you have, one of the first bills to be released in the House is a bill against BDS. So that's crazy. That's some crazy influence. And now if we've also got Russian influence, well, that's also crazy. So the same thing is really strange. But look, we'll see. We'll see, right? We'll see what happens when the Mueller report drops. Again, I hope that we will not be disappointed, but that is my fear. Okay? But as far as Rudy Giuliani is concerned, all these things, I can imagine, if you're Trump's lawyer, makes it really difficult to actually do your job. So while, of course, I don't know for certain, and I'm very open to saying that I don't know, because it's not like I have a draft of Mueller's report, right? Based on what I've seen and read, I wouldn't be surprised if any of this is actually true. Okay. So there's that. Moving on. All right. Now, hundreds of thousands of federal workers continue to go unpaid during the longest government shutdown in history, thanks to President Donald Trump. Now, this includes government workers considered to be essential to the operation of the United States. Now, it's funny, because whenever I hear that, well, I think, okay, well, they're essential. They're essential enough to have to go to work. But apparently they're not essential enough to pay them. I mean, come on, man. Really? A great example is what's going on in our airports, right? Now, airports are kind of important. Turns out we need people at the airports to make sure that flying is relatively safe, right? Now, airport staff has been hit especially hard by Trump's shutdown. Now, and look, flying is bad enough as it is, right? But now what you have is a situation where employees are calling in sick because they're understandably unwilling to put in time for no pay. Even though there is the promise of back pay, we don't know when that's going to happen. We don't know when the government is going to reopen. So that's a bit of a problem, right? But again, there are some employees that have still decided that they would show up and do their jobs. And despite working without getting paid, they've at least tried to make the best of their situation. So this is great. Now, in recent weeks, passengers at New York's JFK Airport have reported hearing TSA agents blast explicit, uncensored versions of rap songs over their loudspeakers. Because, look, if you're not getting paid, then why not? According to Business Insider, Sicko Mode by Travis Scott and Drake has been prominently heard, as well as Lift Yourself, which apparently is a poop joke or a musical poop joke song by Kanye. Other tracks, of course, from Beastie Boys and Ludacris have also apparently been in rotation. Ah, that's great. I love it. Now, of course, I'm not the only one. Apparently, some of the passengers are at least amused and reacted on Twitter. Is De Palma says, TSA has officially stopped giving a fuck. Sicko Mode, dirty version, is playing on the speakers at JFK. Cesar Milan says, apparently the dog whisperer, I don't know if that's the real dog whisperer, by the way, but if it is, great, says, JFK is playing Sicko Mode. We're living in a simulation. Maybe we are. I don't know. Tracy Ellis Ross Jr. says, I was at JFK at 6:30 a.m. the other day, and they were playing that Poopty Scoops Kanye song, and I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Ah, that's great. And then R.L. Barnes, PhD, says, JFK Airport Carousel blasting No Sleep Till Brooklyn at 10:30 p.m. is kind of all right with me. I agree. And then Molly Templeton finally says, the extremely weird feeling when the airport PA is blasting Paramore's Misery Business like it's a super hot 2007 Friday night at old JFK. Hey, you can't blame them from trying to have fun at the job, especially since they're not getting paid at all. So, yeah, look, I got to give these guys points. I mean, a lot of people are understandably staying home. A lot of people are understandably calling in sick and not necessarily just staying home, but going in and working other jobs. because they can't support themselves if they're not getting paid. So these guys who at least are showing up are trying to make light of a bad situation, and so you got to give them a little bit of credit for that. Okay. Yeah, just fun. Just fun. All right. So let's move on. But first, coffee. Now we can move on. So Michael Sonato with a great article in The Guardian about some of the tactics and talking points made against unions, especially as workers for Verizon have been attempting to unionize for better pay and benefits. So unions are, for some reason, a little bit of a taboo subject in this country because apparently there's a lot of people, a lot of regular people who would be helped by unions that despise them. I guess there's a couple of reasons why. At least some of the talking points that I've heard that aren't necessarily reflected in Verizon, but one of them is, well, unions give all the money to Democrats. Now, is that true? I think a fair majority of it is true. And that's why, of course, I'm in favor of, whenever somebody brings that up, well, let's get all money out of politics. So that, therefore, you're not going to have unions giving to Democrats. You're not going to have unions given to anybody. And that kind of levels the playing field for politics. Well, then what are you going to complain about? Well, there are certain union workers that are lazy and can't get fired. If that is true, well, then that's ridiculous, right? Because unions, yes, should protect employees, but they shouldn't necessarily protect the bad employees. And so that can be problematic, but that in itself is no reason to not be in favor of unions. So anyway, now, in documents given to managers and employees, Verizon encouraged its staff to use anti-union rhetoric, not the stuff that I mentioned, but other union rhetoric, anti-union rhetoric, and disparages previous unionization efforts within the company. Now, Sonato explains that several pages of these documents focus on the 6 Verizon retail stores in Brooklyn that voted to join the Communications Workers of America in 2014. Now, that is the first Verizon store to successfully unionize. So you have these, stores, these Verizon stores in Brooklyn that managed to successfully unionize, and that's fantastic. That's great. Now, apparently, Verizon obviously thinks, no, that's not great. That's terrible. We're going to use them as an example, and I'm going to show you how. Now, first, according to the documents, the employees in Brooklyn were highly influenced into voting for the CWA. They were swayed by a good sales pitch through empty promises and unrealistic expectations. Unfortunately, the union does not have to sell with integrity, and it was our Brooklyn employees who paid the price. Well, now, wait a minute. How did Brooklyn pay the price? Did all the employees lose their jobs? Look, that's part of the argument against unions. If you unionize, we're going to close the shop, you're going to lose all your jobs. Well, did that happen? No, it didn't. But before I get to what actually did happen, their rhetoric continues. They said, before you sign anything or even click submit online, think hard about joining a union and remember the story of your Brooklyn workers. Well, let me share that story. Now, what happened is, like I said before, they pushed for and successfully got a union in Brooklyn. So now they joined the Communications Workers of America. Just 2 years later, Verizon pushed for a union decertification vote in their Brooklyn stores. Now, that took 2 years to wind its way through the courts, and in 2018, workers ended up defeating that decertification. Now, that vote to disband the union, like I said, was pushed by Verizon in 2016 during strikes over a new labor contract 2 years after the union was first organized. Now, Monique Rochelle, who was an employee at one of the 6 Brooklyn Verizon wireless stores, who has been involved in the union since it first organized, said this, quote, "They were trying to divide us, creating programs and making false promises to some employees." Oh, now wait a minute. Hold on there. Wait. So they said, oh, the union's going to come at you making false promises. Now we're going to make false promises so you don't create a union. Methinks that is projection. That might be the very definition of projection. There's more. One of the human resources employees at Verizon was going around with the district manager, this is still Monique Rochelle, at the time to talk with employees about the vote. She was giving a lot of false information about the union. They were trying to divide us and creating programs and making false promises, as I said before. Now, what was that false information? Well, apparently it included mischaracterizing how the union helped workers and claiming that a helpline for workers run by Verizon itself would provide the same services as the union. So, wait, you call this helpline? So you think you're not getting paid enough and you call the helpline. What do you think the helpline's going to do? Are they going to help make sure that you get better pay and benefits? No, of course not. That's run by the company. The whole point of the company is to save money so that they can funnel more towards their executives. That's what they do. So, but anyway, now Brooklyn apparently paid the price for the unionization. Not by, of course, having all the scare tactics by the company come true. They're still there. They're still operating. They're still profitable. But in the company attacking the union and attempting to decertify it, which would destroy all the organizers' hard work. Look, I don't know about you, but the fact that the workers voted against decertification and voted for keeping the union kind of tells you that they were very satisfied with how the union was operating. Weird. Weird. Now there's more. In a questions you may have section, oh, I love that, Verizon offers further input against unions. The answers claim that the best way to secure jobs is to provide excellent product services and customer service, rather than join a labor union. But look, joining a labor union isn't about necessarily securing jobs. I mean, yeah, sure, that's a part of it. And another part is putting out excellent product services and customer service. However, here's the thing. Union is also about protecting the worker as well. So, and making sure that the people who work there get fairer pay and, you know, worker protections and things like actual benefits and are treated fairly. That's the whole point. And look, by the way, the securing jobs thing, it's actually kind of a lie as well. It's not true. It's not true. Look, in a lot of places, you have at-will employment. I know here in Michigan, they can fire you for any reason. If you join a union, you at least have some protection about being, or I'm sorry, against being fired for literally no reason. So, nonetheless, Verizon claimed that the 2016 strike of workers at their Brooklyn retail stores and nearly 40 other thousand unionized employees who work as network technicians and customer service reps made working conditions worse, to which they provide no evidence or no examples to back that up. Oh no, it's just worse because we say it's worse. Because now we actually have to pay people fairly. Oh, I don't like that at all. Not only that, but the documents further explain Verizon's anti-union position. They said, quote, "We don't believe unions are necessary at Verizon Wireless, or that you or your coworkers will be well served by electing a union as your collective voice." Well, of course you would be saying that. You're Verizon, you're the company. Yeah, of course that's their position. Is anyone really surprised that that is their position? What they want you to do is they want you, if you have a problem, that you can negotiate with the company directly. And then if you ask for a raise, you can get either denied or fired. And that's it. Problem solved. Let's just hire a new person. Well, that's not, I mean, that's obviously not great for the worker. So, but anyway, Verizon argues the only difference between unions and non-union represented employees are the dues union members pay. Verizon defines a union as, quote, an organization whose income comes from taking a portion of the wages from the employee it represents. I mean, look, I guess that's kind of how it works. And guess what they take that money and use it for? They use it to fight for you. And yeah, and of course, sometimes they use it to lobby politicians and, give to politicians. I said that before. And look, a lot of the times they end up giving to Democrats, mostly because a lot of Democrats, well, I guess not so many anymore, but a lot of Democrats traditionally had very pro-labor views and actually would work to get pro-worker legislation passed. Again, not so much today, now that we have a flood of corporate money in politics, which easily outstrips the amount of spending done by unions. Nonetheless, you want a solution, you get all the money out of politics. But anyway, now Verizon also added, quote, instead of treating employees as individuals, the company has to negotiate with the union on behalf of all employees collectively. And like that is somehow framed to be a bad thing. Oh, it's collectivism. It's socialism. That's the problem. Right. No, that's working as intended. The entire point is to make sure that you have strength in numbers. And that serves to put a worker on more of an even footing with the company that they work for. And that's the whole point of a union. That's the whole point. Not only that, but there's more. In these documents, they also include training for managers on how to respond to pro-union activity. And how do they respond? Well, according to Latasha French, who is an employee, she claimed that Verizon sent union busters to harass her, give her misinformation, and offer false promises, like the possibility to work from home. French added the way Verizon Human Resources had handled complaints of harassment she had made, which included a supervisor joyriding in the wheelchair the company provided for her, had also contributed to her involvement in union efforts. Can you imagine that? You make complaints and the guy's like, don't care. Hey, give me your wheelchair. Let me drive around in it for a while. That served to drive her towards getting a union. Now, she said, quote, I'm not afraid to go up against them because I know I do my job. I know I'm there and available. But what I won't stand for is you're making billions of dollars on our head and you treat us as modern day slaves and like we're uneducated. You're trying to consolidate other departments and you're not giving the people who take these additional duties any more pay. So that is, of course, the reason, or one of the reasons, one of many, that people seek to unionize, because they are not being treated fairly by the company, and oftentimes there is little recourse in a non-union shop. You can talk to everybody you want, but guess what? That doesn't mean anything's going to change, because it is just you versus a corporation, all of their lawyers, all of management, and all of human resources. So that's literally a David versus Goliath situation. And it amazes me that there are people out there that are like, oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I don't mind being David. Well, okay, but think of it this way then. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but think of the union as the slingshot. That sort of evens the odds a little bit. But anyway, there's more. In July of 2018, a Verizon retail store in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, voted to unionize successfully. However, Verizon's union-busting tactics stopped an effort to hold an election to unionize in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, around the same time. So one got a union, the other did not. Now, Daryl Givens, a Verizon employee at the Wilkes-Barre store, said, quote, we ended up pulling the petition. If we lost, we had to wait a year. It was initially 5-4. 2 people didn't want to be involved at all. Now, why was the vote like that? Well, misinformation, of course. He explained that Verizon sent executives to the store in response to union activity. He said the first thing they do is come in and say how awful the union will be for us. And if we go union, they can't do anything special for you. Well, again, with those false promises, right? Oh, no, so we can make special deals with just you specifically. Basically appealing to people's sense of selfishness. Well, maybe if I'm against the union, fuck all these other guys, these coworkers of mine. No, no, no. I'm just going to focus on me and what kind of deals, they're going to give me. The company will. And maybe they'll honor those deals, and maybe they won't. That's the problem of dealing with the company itself. Now, he also said they would come out and not directly say unions, sometimes their stores sometimes get closed, or I'm sorry, trying to entice us in any way to vote no. Given said, they would call us in, do forced meetings with us, and go over how awful unions are. Every few days, we'd get rotated back in. So again, taking away from productivity, going into forced meetings about how terrible unions are. Well, again, if you're coming from the company perspective, unions are terrible. If you're a worker, unions are the only ones that are actually on your side. Now, according to Tim Dubnow, organizing director for the CWA, this is how Verizon operates whenever they see union activity. He said, quote, they distort the truth about unions. They imply union workers make less. I don't know how that happens. They distort the truth about dues and strikes. That's union busting 101 when you walk into the door. They have a jump team ready at a moment's notice to have a forced captive audience meeting to warn about the dangers of unions. So now through all of that, let me show you what happens when you have unions versus what happens when you don't have unions. This is historical, right? So up until around the mid-70s, the United States had very strong unions. Then what happened? Well, we had a couple of different things happen. One, we had more money introduced into politics. Corporations became people, and they got speech rights. Then, and this is just a bit of a simple breakdown, and obviously there are other factors that contributed to it, but one of the biggest factors is when Ronald Reagan broke unions. You saw union membership decline, which corresponded to, as you can see, wages of good producing workers also went flat, while productivity continued to soar. All of that is related to the dearth of union activity that we have today. When you have strong unions, you have higher wages and benefits, and the income gap is a bit closer. When you don't have union representation, which we do here in America, right? We do not have strong unions. I think it's somewhere estimated about 10% of the private sector has union representation, and the people that have more union representation are actually public workers. So with such little representation for the average American, it's no wonder why our wages are stagnant. While people are stressed out and don't have health care, even people with employee-sponsored health care still end up paying massive amounts of premiums and have high out-of-pocket costs. That is what happens when you don't have representation. So, and of course, these companies, they desperately want to keep it this way because they are terrified of unions. Because when workers actually have power, the executives can't extract everything that they can from those workers. They actually have to negotiate with a group that has the workers' best interest in mind. And unfortunately for them, that means less profit for shareholders and executives, and it means a more equal profit distribution. When you're dealing with greedy companies and greedy CEOs and shareholders, and look, I guess to call them greedy is not fair, because, and I know you're going to freak out about that, but these companies, you have to remember what they really are. They are machines. They are basically programmed with one objective: make profit at all costs to give that profit to the shareholders. So you have to have something to balance that out. And what balances it out are unions. Okay. I'm going to take a break here. We'll come back. We got more stories, don't worry, including the good news from Ocasio-Cortez, as well as my thoughts on MSNBC's new political analyst that they just hired. So stay tuned for that. We'll come right back here around the nation. Send your super chats. I will read them after the break. We'll also do a little bit of an update on what's happening with the fundraiser. So like I said, stay right here. We'll be right back around the nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf with you. I don't have any super chats or anything like that. Checking the GoFundMe here. We're still at $500, so we are about a third of the way there. The sooner we get there, the sooner I can shut up about it, which would be nice. But thank you to everybody who has donated so far. Sarge Tech says, ISIS attack in Syria, 4 Americans killed. 2 hours later, Pence gives speech claiming ISIS has been destroyed. Wow. Yeah, I read about that, and all I could do was facepalm. Like, oh no, ISIS, we destroyed ISIS. ISIS completely obliterated. Oh, what, they did what? Oh, shit. Now, of course, they're not going to backpedal. Well, okay, they probably will. They'll backpedal and be like, but I mean, we didn't mean it was completely 100% destroyed, but it's mostly destroyed. It's mostly gone. I mean, kind of. They don't have that much territory. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there, but I'm pretty sure the internet is having a fun time roasting him for that, which is fantastic. I always enjoy that. But not only that, but hey, seriously though, my condolences to the family of those who ended up losing their lives thanks to that disastrous attack. So, okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to good news for once. And it's not that. So we have some fantastic news for progressives. It appears that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will be joining the committee leading the House's oversight of banks, lenders, and financial markets. Yes, it appears that Democratic leaders have recommended Ocasio-Cortez for a spot on the House Financial Services Committee, according to a Democratic source talking to The Hill. Now, Ocasio-Cortez, of course, had talked to The Hill earlier, back in November, saying, hey, man, look, I'm very interested in joining that committee so that I can start pushing it to the left, so I can start proposing and really voting on progressive policy to get that stuff out to the floor. Well, that's awesome. That is excellent news when it comes to finances, when it comes to banking. Now, imagine, right? You have her and Representative Maxine Waters. She's the chairwoman of the House Financial Services Committee. Oh, those guys are going to stick it to Wall Street. Oh, that's going to be great. Now, the people who wrote this article for The Hill, Silva Lane and Scott Wong, point out that while New Yorkers often land seats in the financial services panel, those who do so are often more sympathetic to Wall Street. However, in Ocasio-Cortez's case, that is not true. She has been very, very outspoken against Wall Street, against the banks. She does not take corporate donations, and she criticizes colleagues with close ties to Wall Street in the financial sector. So, that is amazing. Now, Ocasio-Cortez also spoke out against GOP proposals to dismantle Dodd-Frank and supports reimposing Glass-Steagall, which is, of course, a separation of investment and consumer banking, something that, look, that decision to repeal Glass-Steagall, I think that was made during the Clinton administration, was absolutely insane. Insane. Why would you want commercial and investment banking to be the same thing? Look, when you put your money in a bank, you expect it to be fairly safe, right? And then, of course, it's supposed to get loaned out to other people who need money. That's kind of how a bank works. You do not want to put your money in a bank to have the CEO then gamble it on the stock market. Glass-Steagall was that wall that prevented that from happening. But, of course, Republicans and corporate Democrats both agree. Oh, no, we would like to get rid of those rules so that our banking friends can go and gamble and make billions of dollars. And then, of course, when we lose, if it's not FDIC insured, then they end up losing their money. Now, it was FDIC insured, but that just meant that the taxpayers ended up having to pay for those losses, which means they privatized the gains and they socialized the losses. We have to have Glass-Steagall back, and we have to have more banking regulation. We also have to break up the banks. And that's an idea that, of course, Bernie Sanders has talked about quite a bit. Now, AOC should likely also be on that side, although I haven't heard her talk about that. But maybe she has, maybe she hasn't, right? I would hope that she does. Now, she also talked about housing aid. Now, that's a top priority for both her and Maxine Waters. So, here we go. Progressives in charge. Progressives in charge of these very important committees that actually make the decisions on what kind of, legislation will end up making it to the House floor. Now, of course, you have Pelosi that also has to sign off on that and bring that legislation to the floor. That can be a big problem. But I think that if there's enough pressure on Pelosi to put those things forward, then maybe she will end up having to bend to progressives. That's why we not only need an AOC in Congress, we need about 250 AOCs in Congress. We need more progressives in there in order to put that kind of pressure on corporate Democrats as well as Republicans. And I think if we have enough people in there, enough progressives in there, then we'll make a big, big difference. But this is a start. And besides, this is how you know you're winning. I mean, imagine this. We couldn't imagine this years ago. A freshman congresswoman who is deeply progressive, who calls herself a democratic socialist, now getting a committee position immediately after she wins for the first time. Especially now where she is on a committee that oversees Wall Street, and she is not friendly at all to Wall Street. That is awesome. That is fantastic news. Now, again, like you might think, oh, come on, Jeff, you're making too big of a deal of this. We got a lot of establishment opposition to this. Of course we do. But for fuck's sakes, guys, take a win for once. Yes, I know it's a small step. Yes, I know we've got a veritable mountain to climb. Corporate Democrats trying to jump in our path and to block us every single step of the way. But God damn it, we can have a little bit of a win. And I think this is a win. And you've got to start somewhere. And this is a great start. Now what we have to do is we have to keep on pushing. We have to keep on fighting. Primarying Democrats, which of course leads me to 2020, right? Not that I'm talking about AOC 2020. That's a ridiculous idea. Instead of trying to elevate somebody who can't even run for president yet in 2020 because she's not old enough, how about we instead focus on filling Congress, and not only Congress, but our local state houses and local governorships and all that stuff, fill them with AOCs. Fill them with actual progressives who are willing and ready to fight. And of course, you have to watch out for fake progressives. You have to watch out for people like Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke, of course, not progressive at all. And so you have to watch out for those people, and you have to vet them, and you really have to watch out for those red flags. You have to look into their histories, into their voting records, into their past. Nonetheless, when you fight, you win. So we've got to keep fighting. We've got to keep fighting, and we've got to keep pushing for progressives, because this is what happens when you're strong, right? This is how you know you're starting to make an impact. This is how you know you're starting to win. And the establishment is so afraid of AOC. For one, they're like, don't slam me on Twitter, please. Like, don't come after me, because I know how popular you are there. And not only that, but they end up giving her an actually really plum committee assignment. One of the ones that she actually wanted. So that's really good. Now, that said, if you think that's going to shut her up, because we know why the establishment gives out these positions. Oh, if we just give her a good position somewhere and then stack the rest with corporate Democrats where she actually can't do anything, well, that's going to shut her up, and we're still not going to be able to be friendly to the banks, right? If you think that's going to shut her up, you are absolutely wrong. She'll point out the corruption as she continues to do. And if anything, this position is going to embolden the progressive movement to fight harder. Not just, she won that position. Oh, that's great. Now we can leave it alone. Now we can shut up. No. This is going to make us fight even harder. And besides, with AOC teaming up with Maxine Waters, Watch out, corporate Democrats. Watch out, centrists. Progressives are coming. And they're taking over. Okay. Now, speaking of corporate Democrats, let's go to that. Now, where do you go when you're a loser congresswoman who despises progressives? Apparently, you end up on MSNBC. At least that's the case with former Senator Claire McCaskill. Now, Claire McCaskill, of course, was former senator of Missouri. She ended up getting beat by a Republican in the general election just recently. Now, she just announced on Morning Joe, which is, of course, that's the place where you want to go, right, if you want to reach progressives. No, you go there when you want to reach the corporatists, when you want to reach fellow centrists, right? Because that's who Morning Joe is, former Republican, now supposedly an independent, but he'll always be a conservative. And so they have this conservative show. It's 3 hours on MSNBC. It's insane. Anyway, now she announced, quote, "I'm looking forward to bringing my experience from the Senate, hard-fought campaigns, and Midwest common sense to the coverage of breaking political events. And as always, I won't hold back." Well, at least you can trust her on that, because she certainly didn't hold back against progressives. She certainly didn't hold back against Senator Bernie Sanders when he was running in 2016, when he was running in the primary. In fact, she has been consistently attacking progressives, attacking AOC, calling her a shiny object, for Christ's sakes, and saying how much she agrees with Donald Trump. She's supposed to be a Democrat. She's barely a Democrat. Now, according to The Hill, in her new role, and this is funny, McCaskill will provide political analysis on NBC and MSNBC. Because, of course, we should all be taking political analysis from a person who thought it would be great to go even more right-wing in her re-election race and ended up losing. Now, that whole race is about, oh, McCaskill's too liberal. And she's like, no, me, liberal. No, I love Trump. I vote with Trump all the time. I agree with Trump 100% on immigration. In fact, take a look at this. When there was this caravan, right? Now, that caravan, immigrant caravan, whatever, turned out to be obviously a big fear fest. Yes, there were people coming to the American border. Guess what they were trying to do? They were fleeing violence and attempting to try to appeal for asylum. Now, some of them ended up staying in Tijuana, in Mexico, and applying for asylum there. And others, we don't know what happened. But what we do know is that was kind of an election stunt by Donald Trump. As soon as the election was over, he stopped talking about it. And they were still at least a week away. But nonetheless, here's what McCaskill said, quote, of the caravan: "Stop it at the border. I think the president has to use every tool he has at his disposal, and I'll 100% back him up on that." That's her attempt of even reaching further to the right. Oh, no, I agree 100% with Trump. Whatever he does in the border to scare away the caravan, I'm for it. Elect me. Vote for me. Well, it turns out, when faced with the dilemma of voting for a conservative, a Republican, or Republican light, they chose the Republican. But where were progressives? Did progressives have an option? No, they did not. Oh, there are no progressives in Missouri. There are progressives everywhere. You just have to give them an actual choice. And in this case, in McCaskill, they had no choice. They had somebody who voted with Trump about 50% of the time. And obviously, as I said before, went after some of the most popular progressives in the party. Bernie Sanders, of course. Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in America. We know that already. I say that all the time. And I point out that poll all the time. Not only that, but you also had Elizabeth Warren, right? And she continues to attack both of those people in an attempt to win over Republicans. And she ended up losing big time. And as some people are pointing out, she ran and won because she was running against a guy who literally said legitimate rape. Oh, if it's a legitimate rape, the body has a way of shutting that whole thing down. How can you not win against that one? Just saying. As right-wing as she is, or as supposedly liberal as she is, according to Missouri Republicans, Josh Hawley, the guy who beat her, that was apparently a bridge too far for Republicans. At least back then. Maybe now you can get away with a lot worse as a Republican. But anyway, as far as NBC or MSNBC is concerned, that's the kind of expertise that we want. Well, let me tell you, boy, howdy, we can't wait to get our analysis from Claire McCaskill. Now, look, I'm not saying that everyone at MSNBC is terrible. I mean, Chris Hayes seems like a pretty decent person to me. Look, Rachel Maddow is smart. I used to watch her. Now she's kind of unwatchable at this point because, and look, some of the stuff that she's done on Michigan was fantastic about how they've been taking away democracy in Michigan, and sometimes she breaks fantastic stories. But generally, MSNBC is a sewer. I mean, it's terrible. And what they're doing is that they continue to lean in, but they're leaning to the right. So, and they're doing that by hiring corporate Democrats, people who are barely Democrats, who are conservative, and then, of course, conservatives to give you a conservative perspective. Why? Because they are so afraid of being called liberal now. They're not at all representative of progressives. And look, you don't hear from progressives unless you watch independent media, or unless, of course, you end up getting, famous like AOC and Bernie Sanders, which thankfully, of course, they have been on some of those shows. But other than that, do they hire on progressive analysts? Do they hire on regularly enough progressives to counteract both the Republican and the centrist Democrat position? No, they don't. I wonder if there seems to be a bias at work here. Gee, I don't know. I can't tell. Again, all these news outlets, supposed news outlets, are criticizing AOC, Bernie Sanders, and now Tulsi Gabbard. A lot of hit pieces coming out against her when she's apologized for her homophobic past. And again, look, see, here's the thing, right? And forgiving people for things that they've done in the past. I'm actually a big proponent of forgiveness if you have done right, not just by coming out and speaking out against those positions that you previously had, but also doing something about those positions. And to be fair, Tulsi Gabbard has actually sponsored some incredibly strong LGBT protections since then and has come out full-throated against the positions that she used to have. Now, Gabbard, just like AOC and Bernie Sanders and other progressives, they're not perfect, obviously. But from these, other news sources, you have these criticisms, and I think that is driven by an anti-progressive bias. So, mark my word, by the way. Speaking of bias, her analysis for MSNBC is likely going to involve her telling Democrats to go even more corporate and even more right-wing. Lean forward? What a joke. Okay. That said, we are done. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the super chat. Sarge Tech, appreciate that. We still have $500 on our camera, so go to GoFundMe.com/TYTNation camera if you want to donate and help out the show. Help us get new, better equipment that I will have to somehow figure out how to use. So enjoy confounding me when we do raise enough money. So, but you can help us out with that, of course. The link is in the description. Patreon.com/TYTNation is also another way to support the show to continue keeping us running. So you can do that. Venmo, etc. Okay. And we are nearly 100,000 subscribers, so please subscribe if you haven't already too, and like our Facebook page. All right, that's it. Thank you guys. Love you, and appreciate you, all of you. You're great. Thank you so much. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. TYT is next. We'll see you tomorrow.